Socialism is bad. Communism is bad. Totalitarianism is bad. Even if you can't fully explain it, you can start digging into it and then realize these things have never worked in any society in which they've been tried. There are people who say we need to have socialism, but socialism has never worked where it's tried. Communism is a little more severe form, it's a lot more severe form of socialism, where the government it forces you to live a certain place, to work a certain job. You know, there are folks in China, they don't get to choose where they live or what job they do. They're in a communist country, and so their government tells them where they're going to live, how many children they're going to have, what they can and can't own. That's what happens in a communist country. Communism and totalitarianism are fairly close, really, but just by definition, that's more having to do with when there's a dictator, when there's one person in charge and they have total power, total control. But socialism is the step towards communism. Socialism leads to communism, and it can lead to totalitarianism. There's an example in our own world right now, in the nation of Venezuela. In Venezuela, this is an article from a little while ago, about a year ago, but the conditions have not improved in Venezuela. In Venezuela, hyperinflation hits 10 million%. Their money is worthless. It's worth more taking it and turning it into a little purse. I mean, it's just worthless. Why? Because of hyperinflation. And what led to hyperinflation? The tenets, the principles of socialism. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, and yet people are standing in line around a city block just waiting in line to get a meal. Venezuela's state-run economic model wasted the world's largest oil reserves. The country owes $100 billion to foreign creditors. Venezuela's crisis has been marked by corruption, hyperinflation, one of the world's highest homicide rates, food and medicine shortages, and the largest exodus in the recent history of Latin America, according to the UN Refugee Agency. And here I'm looking at a picture of store shelves, not where the ground beef section is empty, but where the entire store is empty, where there's nothing to buy in the store. Its chances to recover may start with Nicolas Maduro stepping down or being forcibly removed, either by the opposition or through foreign military intervention, but that would be the first step to get the ruined economy on the road to recovery. Venezuela's hyperinflation rate increased to 10 million% since 2018, according to the International Monetary Fund, though it is expected to decline to back below 1 million%. Is that good? No, it's catastrophic for a nation due to recent moves by the country's central bank. But the economic situation remains dire. The IMF says the cumulative decline of the Venezuelan economy since 2013 will reach 65% this year, 2/3 decline. For 2019, the annual decline forecast has increased from 25 to 35%. The 5-year contraction is one of the worst in the world over the past half century, and one of the few that was not caused by armed conflicts or natural disasters. What led to Venezuela's trouble? Socialism is the bottom line. And what is socialism? There's a lot of definitions you could say of what socialism is, so I like to use a couple of illustrations to help us understand what socialism is. Socialism is like if a student goes to a school and the teacher says, you all have a class project you're going to work on together, and no matter what any of you do, you're all going to get the same grade. Well, let's say we take 5 students and this project is due in a month. There might be 1 or 2 students who are going to work exceptionally hard. I mean, they're going to do everything they can. They're going to use their minds. They're going to go out of their way to make the project as good as they possibly can. And then there's going to be 1 or 2 students who are going to be somewhere in the middle, kind of, well, slacking a little bit and then working hard some days. And then you're going to have 1 or 2 students who are going to sit back and slack off and watch everybody else work. Well, the day comes for the grade, and the grades are handed out, and sure enough, everybody gets the same grade. And what happens? The ones who didn't do anything pull down the grade of the people who worked the hardest. So the next time it comes around, the next time there's a project, what happens? Well, the next time it comes around, the people who did nothing still do nothing. And the folks who worked the hardest but saw no benefit and their grade was drugged down too, what happens now? They have no incentive to work hard, and they feel the extra burden of pulling the load for other people. So what happens with them? They either get discouraged or they slack on their effort as well. And that's just a small little illustration of what socialism does to a country. What it does is it removes personal responsibility, it removes personal incentive, and it allows for laziness. It allows for people who haven't worked hard, who haven't gone out of their way, who haven't taken risks, to seemingly have a same slice of the pie as someone else. There's a statement that people say, well, it's trickle down in economics. And really that's not a good term for the way capitalism works. It's not trickle down economics where these people at the top are filthy rich and everybody else hopes to get a few little drippings of goodness. No, it's actually reverse. It's the people who have the most money often, regardless of their mentality about money, often the people who have the most money are like a base, like a pyramid, where they're at the bottom and they're holding up the rest of the pyramid. Now, you can like this or not, but I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you have ever gotten a job from a poor man? Now, stop and think through that. You say, well, I don't like that. That's not fair. Okay, wait a minute. So you want what the fellow who started the company has. He spent sleepless nights and sacrificed, and you think, hey, I've come along, I deserve the same thing that guy gets. No, what we need to understand is there are people who have sacrificed, who've gone out of their way to build something, and then people who are hired by them benefit because they hire you. Let's just pretend for a minute those people are extremely selfish. Let's just pretend those business owners, and I'll tell you, I'll just put it out there right now. I've met rich people who are generous, and I've met poor people who are generous. And I've met rich people who are selfish, and I've met poor people who are selfish. So it's not if you're rich, you're selfish. I've met them from both. I've met rich people who are selfish and rich people who are generous. I've met poor people who are selfish and poor people who are generous. Let's pretend that rich man is selfish. You say, well, we need to make him pay. You know, I deserve more. What's going to happen if he loses profits? Is he going to really lose much of anything? No, I'll tell you what's going to happen. People at the top of that pyramid are going to lose some jobs. That's how it works. And what is it in a person's heart and mind that says, I have to have the same thing that guy who started my company has? What is that? Is that a good spiritual motivation? No, it isn't. Socialism has failed everywhere it's been tried. Despite what people say, it does not equally distribute wealth and power. There's this pipe dream that says, well, if we have a socialist country, we're all going to be equal. We're all going to have the same amount of wealth. We're all going to have the same amount of power. Again, it's a pipe dream. It's never worked anywhere. What always happens is there are people at the top who are filthy rich. Go look at all these socialist countries where the people are standing in long lines for bread. Is the president of that country standing in a long line for bread? No. Often he's living high on the hog. And that's what happens in socialist countries. In fact, read the book of Revelation. That's what's going to happen in the book of Revelation. There are going to be people who are going to be working all day just for a little measure of wheat, but there will be people still enjoying the luxuries of life, a very few at the top. And that's what always happens with socialism. The leaders, the dictators are filthy rich and everybody else suffers. Socialism doesn't equally distribute wealth and power. It consolidates wealth and power in the hands of a few people. And the way I like to think of it is like a bully with cookies. You know, the little kid on the playground, he's got the cookies. Everybody's supposed to be sharing, but he's the bully. He's bigger than everybody. He's meaner than everybody. So what does he do? He says, I'm going to give out the cookies. 1 for you, 10 for me. 1 for you, 10 for me. 1 for you, 10 for me. I don't have another one for you, 10 more for me. That's what the bully does. That's what always happens in a socialist government. It consolidates the wealth, it consolidates the power in the hands of a few corrupt politicians, in the hands of a few corrupt people, and they control the wealth, they control the power, and everybody else suffers. I want to read this. This is an article from, this is by the United States Communist Party, and this is Joe Sims, the co-chair of the Communist Party USA, and I'm not going to read the entire speech he gave. He just gave this speech on June 6th of 2020, but he says, our country is in the midst of an unprecedented uprising. By the way, you know how many millions of people have died at the hands of communist governments? How many believers right now in China have to meet in secret because a communist government will kill them or arrest them or bulldoze their church because they're meeting? You know, peaceful protesters who loot and burn and break windows. That's not peaceful protesting. That's thuggery. That's wickedness. You in America have a right to speak your mind. You've been given the right to free speech. You don't have the right to break somebody's windows. You don't have the right to burn somebody's house or their business. You don't have the right to do that. It's prohibits literally trumps law and order versus our right to breathe, battle lines that have the potential to reshape not only policing and the criminal justice system, but also the country's approach to addressing racial justice in general. As I've said, there's not a racist cell in my body. These people are using race to divide us. They're using race to destroy our country. The time has come to consider a radical reform of the prison system. Abolition of the police, along with prisons, is a growing demand. Pretty stupid, honestly. Capitalism, and again, I want to reemphasize what they call capitalism, and you should look up what capitalism is. It's a free market. It's letting the market decide prices, but really it's biblical principles, what it is. Capitalism can't solve this crisis. It couldn't solve it before COVID, and sure can't solve it now. This is where the struggle for democracy meets the socialist moment. Now don't miss this part. It's a place where national democratic tasks, the struggle for equality, and working class interests intersect. Why? This is socialism's dream. This is communism's dream. Here it is. This wraps it up in one nice little sentence. Because the only possible means for addressing the crisis is with massive government intervention. Did you hear that? Massive government intervention. That is what socialism is about. That wraps it up in a neat little shell. It's all about government being involved in every area of your life because you're not big enough, responsible enough, smart enough, wise enough, hardworking enough to take care of things yourself. You couldn't possibly be expected to carry self-responsibility for anything, so the government will do it for you. You need massive government intervention in your life. Notice, starting with the extension of unemployment compensation after July 31st, the public sector has to get involved, but that's just the beginning. In light of what's been happening on the streets, the Kamala Harris, who is running for vice president on the Democratic ticket, and by the way, the Democratic Party that took under God out of the pledge. You say, well, we all serve different gods, so does it mean anything anyway? I'd rather at least keep under God in the pledge of the United States of America than take out under God, which the Democratic Party did. I'm going to just tell you how it is. I'm an independent. I'm not beholden to any party. I'm not. But I sure don't want to be part of a party that says we're going to take God out of the pledge. Don't want anything to do with that. In light of what's been happening on the streets, the Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders $2,000 a month proposal is looking better and better. Now let's think through this a minute. You know what? We're just going to give everybody $2,000 a month, no matter what you do, no matter what you don't do. $2,000 a month. Doesn't that sound exciting? Man, that's exciting. But as Margaret Thatcher said, socialism is a great idea until you run out of other people's money. And that's what happens. Oh, in the beginning, it's a utopian dream. It's just amazing. We're all getting $2,000 a month. And then all of a sudden we realize we can't sustain that. Who's going to pay for that? Free candy for everybody. It doesn't work. It fails every time it's been tried. Socialism and communism have failed. As this co-chair of the Communist Party said, we need massive government intervention. Here's what happens in a socialist country. The government controls everything, but don't miss this, the government takes the place, number one, of God. In China, you're not allowed to worship or serve any god but the government. Did you hear that? No, yeah, I know. They're state-sanctioned churches, but those are puppets of the government and who are only there as long as they are talking well about the government. So the government in a socialist country, in a communist country, takes the place of God. A church, a Bible-preaching church, a Bible-believing Christian is a great threat to a socialist country. It's a great threat to a communist country. Why? Because they don't want you beholden to anybody but to them, to the government. The government takes the place of God. The government takes the place of parents. You don't believe that? Look at the Communist Manifesto. They don't want you teaching your kids. They teach you, they want us to believe your children don't belong to you. They belong to the government. Folks, this isn't stuff I'm saying. This is stuff they're saying. Your children don't belong to you. They belong to the government. It's the government's job. It's all of us. It takes a village. It's our job as a collective whole to teach your children and to provide for your children. So you need massive government intervention. You know, homeschooling, Christian schooling, no. You need to put your kids in our public school system because we really are in control of your family. The government in a communist and socialist country takes the place of God. It takes the place of parents. Last of all, it takes the place of your own personal responsibility. Cradle to grave. You don't need to worry about working. Government will take care of you. You don't need to worry. We'll tell you where you're going to live. We'll tell you how many kids you're going to have. We'll tell you, we'll cap your salary to a certain place. And, government knows that. That's why they believe in the abolition of private property. By the way, this term, democratic socialism, it sounds nicer than just saying socialism. But what it really means is that if a majority decide to, they can steal from you whatever they want to steal from you. It's a democracy. So, hey, let's have a vote tonight. Somebody has a nice car out there. We really want to claim that car for the benefit of all the church to use. So let's have a vote. How many of you'd like to claim that car tonight? All in favor? That's what democratic socialism is. Now, what is the problem biblically with socialism, communism, totalitarianism? First of all, it violates 2 of the 10 commandments. What's the first commandment it violates? It violates the commandment, let's go to Hebrews 13, please, is the command, thou shalt not covet. What is covetousness? It's me looking at something you have and wanting it. And it's me being willing to do whatever I need to do to get it. Well, my boss, look, I hope you get paid more. But your mentality ought not to be towards your boss or towards your company. Well, I just need a fair shake. I need to have what they have. Thou shalt not covet. Class envy, class warfare. Let's look at Hebrews 13. Now, if this conflicts with American materialism that's crept into our hearts, then we better change our hearts. We better yield to the Word of God. Look at Hebrews 13, verse 5. It says, let your conversation be without, what's the next word? Without what? Covetousness, and be, what's the next word? Content. Does he really mean that? Let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as ye have. For he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. Realize that God is all you need. He is the blessing that you have. And don't let your life be defined by things. Socialism violates this command, thou shalt not covet. Can I tell you, by the way, there's no end to that? There's no end to covetousness. You want something somebody else has today, you'll want something somebody else has tomorrow. It's like a little kid in the nursery who there'll be 1,000 toys in the nursery, and a little boy in the corner is playing with one toy. Guess what toy that other child wants? The one he's playing with. That's what covetousness is. That's what socialism does and communism. It violates this command, thou shalt not covet. It sets up class warfare. What other commandment does this violate? It violates the commandment, thou shalt not steal. Now go to Luke chapter 3, verse 7. Would it be okay for somebody to kick down your door, 3 a.m., walk in and help themselves to whatever they want? Because after all, they're going to go give it to somebody else. Is that okay? No, it's not okay. You see, you do have private property you are responsible for. God has entrusted to you. Okay, would it be okay if instead of kicking down your door at 3 a.m., if instead they go down to the government and they have a vote and they decide that they're going to take said items from your home and still distribute them? Is it okay now? No, it's still stealing. You see, Luke chapter 3, I want you to notice this, verse number 7. He said to the multitude that came forth to be baptized of him, O generation of vipers, who hath warned you to flee from the wrath to come? Bring forth therefore fruits worthy of repentance. And begin not to say within yourselves, we have Abraham to our father. For I say unto you, that God is able of these stones to raise up children unto Abraham. Skip down to verse 10. The people asked him, saying, what shall we do then? He answered and saith unto them, he that hath 2 coats, let him impart to him that hath none. Say, wait, that's socialism. No, it isn't. That's a man who owns 2 coats, deciding he's going to give one of his coats to somebody else. That's a good thing to do. Nowhere do you find it where it says the government should come and take the coat from the man and give it to whomever they decide to give it to. He that hath meat, let him do likewise. You have food, you have extra food, you can share it with somebody who doesn't, do it. That's what you ought to do. But the government should not come to you and tell you what you have to take out of your fridge and what you have to take out of your freezer and give to somebody else. By the way, not everybody will treat your possessions with respect. Not everybody will do the right things if things are given to them. Here in Luke 3, Jesus says to verse 14, the soldiers likewise demanded of him, saying, what shall we do? And he said unto them, do violence to no man, neither accuse any falsely, and be, what's the next word? Verse 14, be what? Content with your wages. Socialism violates this matter of covetousness. It also violates the command not to steal. Again, even if somebody's not knocking your door down, if they're voting to take your stuff and give it to somebody else, it is still stealing. And socialism, as I said, doesn't equally distribute wealth and power. It consolidates wealth and power in the hands of a few people, and it removes the incentive for you to try harder. Go to 1 Corinthians 4, verse 7. This is so important for us to understand these very basic principles. All that we have, ultimately, it comes from God. It doesn't come from government. It doesn't come from government. Your rights don't come from government. Your material possessions don't come from government. They come from God. 1 Corinthians 4 verse 7 says, "For who maketh thee to differ from another?" Are we all the same? We're not all the same. We're different colors. We're different heights. We're different weights. We come from different socioeconomic backgrounds. We come from different backgrounds of education. We're equal, but we're not all the same. It's the variety, which is a great part of what has God has created in the world. So who made us that way? Who made us to differ from another? It's the Lord. "And what hast thou that thou didst not receive?" Everything we have, we receive from God. The breath we have, we got from God. Our bodies, the strength to work, a job, it comes from God. The food, the sustenance we have, yes, we work, but God provides, not the government. Again, in a socialistic country, the government wants to replace God. But everything we have comes from God. "Now, if thou didst receive it, why dost thou glory as if thou hadst not received it?" All that we have ultimately comes from God. Number two, God does not bestow opportunities, goods, or other things upon us equally. He doesn't. Go to Romans chapter 12, verse 3. Say, "Well, that's not fair." Well, you can say what you like, but God's in charge, and He doesn't give us all things equally. He doesn't. Are we equal? Yes, we are. We're all made of the same stuff. God's no respecter of persons, but God doesn't bestow things upon us equally. Look at Romans chapter 12, verse 3. It says, "For I say through the grace given unto me to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to every man the measure of faith." Go to Matthew 25. There's an example here, a Lord who gives different responsibilities to His servant. Now look at Matthew 25. It's kind of similar to how the Bible talks about that we're all the same body. We work together, but we're different parts. Ear's not the same as the eye. The foot's not the same as the hand. They're different, but they all have a role to play. Look at Matthew 25, verse 14. It says, "For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents." Talents, we use talents like ability, but in the Bible, talents is money. He gave him 5 talents. To another 2, and to another 1. Now hold on. One servant got 5 talents, one got 2. One got 1 to work with. Is God unfair? No, because all of it belongs to Him in the first place. The 5 belongs to Him, the 2 belongs to Him, and the 1 belongs to Him. But He gave these according to the men, verse 15, to every man according to his several ability. I want the same thing that Fortune 500 boss has. Can I ask you a question? Can you run his company? God gives us different abilities. He gives us different talents. So that's not fair. God didn't say anything about giving us equal talents. It all comes from Him. And He went to one man and said, "I'm going to give you 5. He went to one man and said, "I'm going to give you 2. He went to another and said, "I'm going to give you 1. Is that fair? Sure, it's fair. It's all God's. Notice verse 16, "Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same and made them other 5 talents. Do you notice that? What did he do? He invested what he had. That's important. He took the 5 he had and he made 5 more by his work, by his effort, by investing what his master had entrusted to him. Likewise, he that had received 2, he also gained other 2. Well, how did he gain other 2? Did he just sit it there and it grew 2 more? No. He went and worked with it and exchanged and worked and thought, and 2 more. Verse 18, "But he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them." By the way, we're all going to give an account of our lives to God. We're not going to be able to stand before God and say, "Lord, you gave so-and-so that education, that family, those finances. You didn't give that to me." God's going to say, "Yeah, but I gave you this and this and this. What'd you do with it?" See, I'm not going to answer for what I don't have. I'm going to answer for what I do have. I'm going to answer for what God has entrusted to me. Notice, he reckoned with his servants, verse 20. "So he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliveredst unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. What does the Lord say to him? The same thing. Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee. Now what is he doing right now? He's blaming the Lord for why he couldn't do anything because he only had the 1 talent, because it was the Lord's character. He's going to blame the Lord for why he didn't do anything with what God had given to him. I knew thee. Thou art an hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast that is thine. His Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and," what's the next word? "Slothful servant. Thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed." If you knew that about me, then you know what you should have done? Verse 27, "Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury." If you had at least gotten me a little bit of interest off what I gave you, but you didn't do anything with what I gave you. You buried it. "Take therefore the talent from him, and give it unto him which hath 10 talents. That's not fair. You know why the Lord does that? Because He knows the fellow who has 10 is going to work with the one he's just now gotten as well. He's going to invest. The master knows he can trust that man with that one that the other man went and buried. "For unto every one that hath shall be given." Doesn't that seem backwards from socialism and communism? Everyone that hath shall be given. Why? Because He'll take care of it. Number one, all we have ultimately comes from God. Number two, God doesn't bestow things upon us equally. So stop comparing your life to somebody else and saying, "I can't do anything with what God's given me." No, God has given you something. So instead of comparing what you have to somebody else, take what you have and invest it. Use it for God's glory. Number three, we see from this story that God is an investor. You know what God wants? He wants what any investor wants, a return. He wants to know that if he puts something in, he's going to get something out. Everything we have comes from God, but God wants to give things to people who are going to do something constructive with them.